Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of May 9th, 2021. Now, this is a notable event because it is our 52nd Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Our first Virtual Enlightenment Salon was conducted on May 10th, so we are almost to the 1-year anniversary of this series, and every single week we have been providing you with a thorough intellectual discussion on matters of great importance to humankind and the future of our species. And we are going to continue along these lines today. Please welcome our distinguished panel. I am Gennady Stoliarov II, chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. We have with us Art Ramon Garcia, our director of visual art. We have our foreign ambassador in Spain and technology advisor, Dr. Jose Cordero. We have our member, Jason Geringer. And our special guest today is an individual who may be familiar to many of you because he was one of our presidential primary candidates in 2019, Mr. Charles Holsopple. He is also a great humanitarian and entrepreneur. He founded Project 222, now called Suki 222, whose aim is to provide everybody with a minimum of water, shelter, and food access, which is what Charles will discuss today. And so Charles, welcome to our virtual Enlightenment Salon, and please let us know what you have been up to in the recent year and a half, as well as how your work with Suki 222 began.
Great, thank you, Gennady, and appreciate this opportunity to share, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Yeah, I got started, I'll go back to really what drove me, and that goes back to 4 or 5 years old. I grew up in the South, where there was segregation, white and colored water fountains. And at a young age, I asked my dad, what's the difference? And he told me there's no difference. And when I persisted, he told me the colored one's sweeter. In other words, he didn't buy into the system. So, and then it came to the little girl next door when I was preschool. I just heard about heaven and hell. And I told her that what she needed to do to go to heaven. And she says, well, we don't believe in Jesus. So she was a Jewish. So my mother told me, no, she's not going to hell. So there were always exceptions to what people said that they did and believed and was true, and then what actions they took, because there was an unjust distribution of opportunity. And I witnessed it firsthand. So as I matured, I went in the Army as a medic out of college because my draft number was low. And I got out and I did the thing. I got a job. I bought some real estate. I was good at my job. So I made enough money that at 52, I had this idea. One, that I wasn't going to continue to do what I was going to do. I was going to drop out, if you will, and take a sabbatical. And when I went to the psychiatrist's office and I said, look, this is huge what I'm about to do, but tell me, diagnose me if there's something there, because I'm going to make a story out of this life, And she said, no, you're there's nothing wrong with you. And she said, you're above average intelligence and you're trying to figure something out, and you're fine. So I quit work. And when I did that, I had this idea. I had taken to the University of Akron, their polymer engineering school, of an inflatable shelter that looked like a little cottage, but it was inflatable. And then you would take and build that out of a fabric that, when coated, would become the tensile strength of a shell. And then you would take indigenous material and infill where the air cavities were to get your compressive strength. And I was telling this to 4 department chairs and 2 patent attorneys of this idea that if it could be developed and clustered and stacked, it could address the housing situation around the planet, right? So they were fascinated and intrigued, and they encouraged me to try to get them funding for the proposal, which I didn't have any dealings with universities, which is can be quite difficult at times, for what I was told and what I've found out. But also the along the course of the National Science Foundation application and entrepreneurial studies contest that the students won that used this PolySmart is what we were calling it, this shelter. I realized that it didn't matter how many, how fast, how affordable, how well these units performed, if we didn't build a collective and an individual understanding of the existential threats we face. I'd rather have a silk sheet between friends than a concrete wall between enemies. When you transfer that to energy and cost and everything else, it's just homeostasis works better than chaos, right? When you're trying to find some sort of balance. So, it went on for a couple of years that I was working. I visited the United Nations in New York, and they sent me to the Global Housing Foundation that was working in third world countries with housing and realtors. But I was trying to get them to see, because the researchers and the professors told me it may take 25 years, but it was feasible. So 52, I'm thinking 25 years, what best to work on? Because I really don't want to go back into the rat race. And so I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And couldn't get through. But through the course of this, I went up to Washington to talk to the Congress and senators, and I was going to say, look, there's this thing, I was calling it Global Shelter Project. Here's what the professors say it's worthy of study. Let's get on it. Maybe we can do it in 7 or 8 years instead of 25. And here would be the results and the benefits to humanity. So the day I got up there, the Occupy movement broke out in DC, October 6th. And people from all over the world were coming to demonstrate and to protest in support of Occupy Wall Street, but also in some very important issues that I related to. So that night I ended up sleeping on Freedom Plaza with about 100 other people. And then for the next 3.5 months, my tent was there on Freedom Plaza with 100 or 50 or however many people that camped there, just the feet from the White House, 3 blocks from the White House, and in clear view of the Capitol building on Pennsylvania Avenue. So I was there, and the swell of protest and really the wealth of information on what some of the governmental systems affected and the prison for profit came up, and the all kinds of issues, drones, the Middle East, healthcare, really pretty much the when you look at the structure of the Sustainable Development Goals to eradicate poverty, everybody was represented at Occupy, and some very articulate people, and but it got a bum rap. But during that time, I was introduced to the White House Peace Vigil there on Freedom in front of the White House, and it's the closest resident to the White House. When I say resident, there's been a protester there since 1981, 24 hours a day, and it's been to the Supreme Court on a First Amendment challenge. So the park police would love to get rid of it, but as long as someone is there, then they can't haul it away. And the vigil, besides the 2 anti-nuclear signs that have different other protests along the way, there's a big beach umbrella between it and a couple of pallets underneath that, and then some plastic that covers the umbrella. So when it rains, the vigil keeper, whether it snows or whatever, middle of the night, 12 degrees, those are some of the things that I experienced when I was there, a couple thousand hours, letting the 73-year-old woman that had been there since the 80s go back to her apartment to rest. And so I was caught up in this, and then I started spending all these hours at the vigil, and it turns out that little vigil, that if you look at photographs of it, if you Google the White House Peace Vigil, it's about 200 cubic feet, right? And at the time, I was using 1.75 gallons of water as the minimum required for life, according to the World Health Organization. And so I had 1.75 gallons of water. I used 2,000 calories at the time. This was 2011, and I used the 200 cubic feet of shelter came through me through that process. So, but it didn't get. I was in a great strategic spot, thousands of people going by, but at the time I didn't have 222 and the clarity of how it could work, and actually I'll go into some of the things that are working about it. But at the time it was conceptual. I was calling it global shelter. I was disorganized as everyone else there, except for this vigil. But as time went by, the park police came in with their sweepers and threw all of our tents away and acted as if it was radioactive. And so that ended. And then in 2013, still thinking food, water, shelter, there's a formula there. I had to get through to the intellectual understanding of our situation as it is, as well as the empathetic understanding and ability to act with both of those in relationship to these many existential threats we face. And if you go back through some of my writing and from 2005 on, it deals with that scope and that scalability that we need to address. So the 2013 hit, and I had gone without a car and traveled around different parts of the world since 2005. So I bought a car in 2013, and I went up to the Indian reservation in the Dakotas, where another nonprofit had been working. We weren't a nonprofit at that time. It was just a loose concept and blog and whatnot. But they were working on a technology of a panelized housing structure that went up in a few days and would last, and using conventional materials, but it cost about $70,000, and it really didn't work to scale. So I was going to convince the founder of the nonprofit that was working there, who had very good connections, that the inflatable was worthy of support to get funding to develop to go to scale. And I failed in that. I was useful in constructing the house because I have construction experience. That is my background. But he said, "Hey, you're way out. I'm looking at what I have on the ground and nothing more. You know, I'm working on these kids," which I had to respect. But still, I pressed on. So I went to Colorado, and then I went to Seattle, and then I came back to Colorado, and then I went to Burning Man. I don't know if you're familiar with Burning Man, and I went there for a week, and through that, I'm contemplating. There's a lot of time to be creative. That's what's encouraged there, is radical creativity and self-expression. So out of that, the 2 gallons of water, I believe that's where it came together, the 222. And so I knew I had something that was biologically true, that 2 gallons of water was required for life, because World Health Organization now says it's 7.5 liters to 13.5 liters. Interesting enough, 7.5 liters is 1.98 gallons. So we'll use the 2. And so during that Burning Man and getting that together, I went out to San Francisco, Berkeley to be precise, and I parked my car there 2 blocks off campus, and I went over into the park, and I slept there that night under the stars in the park with many homeless and just people that had been living in Berkeley through a very historic portion. The Beat Generation was right there on Mediterranean Avenue, right by the park. And so I slept there 3 or 4 days under the stars, getting to know the people in the park. And through that process, I took before I threw my wallet away and all my money and lived homeless there, I had gone to the Tibetan store, and I had bought this ring and this necklace, and but I got to know the Tibetan twins, and they knew I was on a journey, and they said, Charles, you're on a journey, and it's about more than you, and it's about all of us, and you need certain strengths. You need something to draw from that will keep you strong and on your path. And I thought that was very curious, because that's exactly what was going on, and he recognized that. So he brought in a Tibetan elder, and the elder, after talking to me for a while, he says, I'm going to give you 3 mantras, and this will help you along your path. And he gave me the masculine mantra, Mani Padme Hum, and he gave me the feminine, Tar Tuttar Tarisoha. And then he said, if you are in danger and you need the strength, the entire feminine strength, Tara was my mantra, Tara. So as I say, I ended up throwing my wallet away, throwing my ID away, sleeping in the park, walking into San Francisco, experiencing life in the street, and getting to know those people and what made them tick and what made them happy, what made them, and it was mostly kindness. If you showed kindness to anybody, it was, it's amazing what you could get. They'd share their food with you and whatnot, even if they had difficulty getting it. So, but through the course of that, I lost about 20, 25 pounds. And, I'm 6'4", but I was never heavy. So I was down to in the 170s. And Vinjay, the owner of the Tibetan store, convinced me to go to the hospital to get checked out. He's, and I said, no, I'm fine. I was manicky. I was getting very little sleep, eating very little, but experiencing mentally the freedom that I'd been seeking since I was 5 years old to actually express openly with whoever happened to be there. And it was remarkable the situations that I would get in and experience kindness back. So I went to the hospital with him, and after a 4 or 5 hour ordeal in the waiting room at a county hospital in Oakland, I finally got seen. They put an IV in me and kept me in the hallway for 8 hours, and then discharged me midday the next day. And so I don't have any money. I don't have anything really. I thought I'd thrown everything away, other than a pair of boots that didn't fit me well. And you being a runner, maybe you can relate to this. And so I start walking, and I've got about a 15-mile walk, and I'm meandering, just happy as I can be. But it gets late, it gets dark, it gets San Francisco cold, and I mentioned I was a medic in the Army, and I start experiencing early stage hypothermia, and I don't have, I'm weak. Anyway, I felt good into that moment, but all of a sudden my body started shutting down, and I went back to Tara, and I looked down, Gennady, and right then, had to be right then, it wasn't, I see a carpet that's rolled up in the plastic like it's still from the department store. And it's on the sidewalk there. I open it up. I take the plastic off. It's 5'7". I'm 6'4". It's 5x7. I get inside the carpet and I go to sleep. Well, in the middle of the night, my hand gets caught in these beads and it pops them. You can see, in fact, right here where I tied the knot back to get the beads on. Well, about the time I get the knot tied and the carpet rolled up, it's early foggy morning, and a little car pulls up, and a little woman looks at me and says, "Oh, you found my carpet." And so, you asked me what drives me. When she said that, when I woke up in the middle of the night and my hand was caught in here, the beads snapped, so, well, I told you, I strung back the beads. I had extra beads left over because I had to tie the knot, right? It wasn't built that way. But she pulls up and she asks if I need anything. well, at first, I helped her load the carpet, and obviously I put it in the little hatchback that she was driving. And she says, "Do you need anything?" I said, "Well, I could really use a pair of socks if you have a pair of socks, because my feet were raw from these boots." And she looks in the back seat underneath a bunch of other stuff, pulls out a pair of little children's socks with glitter. And I'm one, appreciative that she found these, but also I'm thinking that I have these extra beads that I couldn't fit back on, and I can put them in that little sock. I'm also thinking that when I was in front of the vigil with the little woman that I was assisting, and that plastic that helped that umbrella cover her, and was the tent poles that she is used to use sticks and configure that plastic to stay up. And so I got some tent poles from the Freedom Plaza where the tents would be trash, but the tent poles were around. And I improved the shelter with those tent poles. But in order to not poke the tent pole through the plastic, I would take, wherever they came from, little children's socks and mittens would show up on the plaza. We didn't have any infants, but people would give those to the donation bucket. And so I would tape these on the end, and that would, so this little lady, the beads, the socks, the whole thing was very surreal. But she went on her way and about her business. Another thing that back to 2011 that gave me the confidence to keep going, that I was on to something. I didn't know exactly what it was yet, but I knew I could. My goal was to reach the world with a common message, that we would see the commonality and the togetherness, and as well as those existential threats, to use the technology that we have, or that we need to develop, and we are going to develop, to use our resources for the equity within us all. But so one night, just one more part of the story. I'm in, this is back to Freedom Plaza. I'm in the Occupy movement. I'm spending 12 hours a day at the White House Peace Vigil in 6-hour shifts. So it's time for me to take my evening shift, and it's rainy and it's cold. And I'm looking for a pair of gloves, but to fit me. And in the lost and found, and I can't find any there. So I get on my bicycle, because I could zip around DC anywhere I want, from protest to protest, to see what they were doing. Everybody was a little suspicious of me because I wouldn't stay anywhere very long. I would go and I'd check on all the different activities, and then I'd go back and spend my time at the Peace Vigil. So, but I was looking for a pair of gloves, and I can't find them. So I go up to 15th, and I go past Secret Service on Pennsylvania Avenue, and I look down, and I see what looks like a dry pair of socks. I go to pick up the socks, and it's a bicycle glove with the 2 fingers and the 2 fingers. I said, that's perfect. After 7 hours of the vigil, I go back past where I found that glove, turn on 15th, go down F instead of E, which I always turned on. And 7 hours later, in the middle of the street, is the other glove, looking like it was just dropped minutes ago. So, what got me started on it is a mathematical formula that says we all need food, water, shelter. And then when I had discovered 222, that since then, that's been my goal, is to get that recognized within the United Nations as indicators of what it takes to survive. 2 gallons of clean water a day, which is agreed upon, 2,000 nutritional calories, which is an average that is agreed upon, and 200 cubic feet of shelter, the size of that little vigil in front of the White House, or the size of the car I lived out of in 2013. So I come about the quantities honestly, and it's something that, for a number of reasons, people relate to. So, yeah. And then just recently, there's Clubhouse.
Yes. So before we get into Clubhouse, thank you for sharing your story, Charles. I wanted to give the opportunity to those of us on the panel to ask any questions they have for you up to this point. So Jose, please go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you, Charles, to be with us and to share this initiatives. I remember your campaign for the Transhumanist Party nominee. That was very interesting. And let me also welcome you, invite you to come to the next Global Transhumanist Summit that I am organizing in Madrid, in Spain, next October after the pandemic. We will be discussing many of these ideas in Spain during the Transvision Madrid 2021 conference. And now let me ask you a quick question, because I actually grew up in South America. I was born in Venezuela, and so I have seen a lot of poverty, and not just now in Venezuela, but in many other countries in Latin America or in Africa, where I worked for 2 years. And my impression is that people just don't want two. They want infinity, 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 which actually are the 3 pillars of transhumanism: infinite intelligence, infinite longevity, and infinite happiness. So basically, we want to have us more intelligence, longevity, and well-being, happiness. So as a person who was born in what you called the third world, which, by the way, is no longer used. People don't talk anymore about the third world. That is offensive.
Developing.
Yes,
Yeah.
we call it now the developing countries or developing nations. In any event, we don't want two. We want infinity, infinity, infinity. And I say it seriously. I was also founding faculty of Singularity University, where we talk about abundance. We talk about moving from scarcity to abundance so that people have as much as they want. Obviously, and I agree with you, so do not get me wrong, I agree with you that probably two is okay. It's probably okay, but you should let people have infinity, infinity, infinity. So that's my question to you from a transhumanist from the developing world.
So the question is, do I favor people having infinity? You know, I think I understand when you say infinity, it's more, and why limitless, maybe limitless. So I'm okay with people having limitless resource. It's not that I'm trying to take anything away from people. Now, I think the more we're educated about the limit of resources, the improvement of our lives, both emotionally and materially, the better we use those resources, and the more just those resources are shared within society. If we have a segment of society that has everything, and we have the majority of society that has nothing, below 222, you won't, by definition, you won't have a peaceful, prosperous planet. And so whether, you know, we can't have limited fish. There's only so many fish in the ocean. There's only so much, you know, oil in the ground. If we're looking at living forever, we need to look at those resources in a sustainable consumption. So I think education's at the key of developing countries, and it's also the key of our developed countries on just the math of the situation. You know, when you say, are we able to provide 222? You know, what would be needed to change? You know, I don't think you're going to have to take the food out of people's mouths in order to feed other people, but you can change their diet. That's actually better for them, for us, if we change our diet, as well as it could be better for the planet, the carbon footprint and everything else. So what I'm trying to do is get experts that, like yourself, that are involved in changing society to face those threats. That's what I referred to or identified most with the Transhumanist Party is using technology to advance the human species as well as other life on the planet. and again, mathematically, you can extend a lot more lives by making clean water available to a population that's thirsty for it, and same with nutrition. So when you look at who's going to extend the lives more, I thought that was a part of my campaign. Really, is this is a measurable thing, and 222 is all about measuring. We're not saying we're going to take away. What we're saying is we're going to provide for. I was interviewed not long ago, and I used the expression: if we have the billionaires that have the 400-foot yachts and they sail around ports these days, there's only so many ports in the world that they're safe to go into, and they can only venture out into certain areas within those ports that they feel secure. But what if we made, and they may be supportive of antiquated industries or policies that suppress other people's available food, water, shelter, health care, education, women's rights, everything else that a town center would benefit from. So if they were to donate that 400-foot yacht and buy themselves a bigger one and donate that one to the community, they could be heroes and expand their boundaries of their everything. Because right now, even money doesn't buy you everything, never has, but it's buying you less and less as those existential threats affect more and more people.
So if I understand you correctly, Charles, you don't have any objection to everyone having infinity. It's just that for the time being, you want to raise the baseline so that everyone has 222 and can build from there, or build from whatever position or situation in life they happen to find themselves. Is that accurate?
Well, it's not that I'm opposed to people having infinity. It's just impossible, right? I mean, we're dealing with a finite set of water. We're dealing with a finite set of food and shelter. Now we can because it's organic, we can adjust the food supply, and because it's shelter, we can use many different materials. We can and different construction methods. They can have as big a house as they want, but it also gets back to that empathetic and emotional attachment to society. People don't want infinite and everything. I mean, in an imagination, it's possible. You can have the infinite freedom of thought. You can, but even that's not true. If your daily existence is fetching water, you don't have freedom of thought, because that's what keeps you alive. So I want peace, justice, and I think the way to get that is to look at biological truths, look at policies in a truthful way and see what they affect, and look at the goals that we've got for impacting change. So, and how we measure that change. That's what I'm trying to do. So I think the people that want infinite, good luck to them. It's not realistic. You can't have everything. That's the way they say, when you tighten your fist, you hold tightly what you have, but you're excluding other things. So I think it gets into the philosophy of having everything more than the practicality of it.
So I think this is a good occasion to bring in a comment from our viewer, Mike Lazine, who, by the way, has expressed great admiration for your origin story in the American South, and how essentially quite progressive that origin story was for that time period. He points out that the planet Earth produces enough resources for more people than the humans alive. The problem stems from nations controlling the resources and not using them wisely. And I think this goes to the question of growing the pie, so to speak, so that if everybody has a share of that pie, that share is larger. And as a result, people can live more prosperously than the average person today. And perhaps it's a little bit of shorthand to say infinity, infinity, infinity for everyone, but don't you think it is possible for everyone to have a materially higher standard of living than they do today? And that would mean the poorest people have 222 and then some, and the middle class people start living like the wealthy people of today, and the wealthy people of today might start living like trillionaires and have colonies on Mars and on other worlds and bring in more resources to humankind so that we have more materials, more places to inhabit. So do you think that is a possibility, not infinity all at once, but a growth trajectory that benefits everybody and lifts up living standards for all?
Well, if I go back to math, and the universe is ever expanding, then I guess the answer is possible to say what you're saying is true. There are many errors we can make along the way, and that could be could make it difficult. Because, I mean, the possibility is very, very small anyway, right? I think it's smaller than whether or not we can get 222. Even if we get 222, we can't guarantee that technology is going to get us through the other existential threats we face, right? I mean, we have other things going on. So I think eventually, I guess the math would say that we have to move on from this planet, right? So that we have to plan for that, and there's a lot of people that are putting that into. So I don't think exploration into those potential areas is wasted by any means. It normally shows up in marginal improvements. It's not normally exponential as it shows up. But that I say that, but the growth of the chip has really put us in a whole new, and will over the next 10 years in my perceptions, it's going to change us more than the automobile, so you'd mentioned governments and having control and of resources and assets, and I guess that's true, but I think it's more true that corporations are controlling the governments and the resources and the assets. So it's not just the governments. And then when you get to corporations controlling it, then if the consumer, who controls who? The consumer controls the manufacturer, or the manufacturer controls the consumer, the corporation. Is the corporation reliant on their customer base, and can their customer base be persuaded to other products and other means of day-to-day existence that reduces consumption and reduces waste and makes a more circular economy that does bring people up. And I think the more people we bring up to that minimum, the further that research and human potential can get us to that step of, we don't want to use the word utopia, but a world where everyone can actually harness their creativity in order to contribute back to their own well-being and their self-esteem within community.
Yes, and this is a worthwhile premise, I think, because it is true that if somebody is struggling to fulfill the basic material necessities of life, there's not a lot of room for higher order experimentation or exploration. You generally don't have great inventors or great artists or great scientists, composers, business leaders arising directly from dire poverty. Generally, they need to have some sort of breathing room, so to speak, in their lives to focus on creativity. They don't have to be wealthy, but it's good to at least be lower middle class if one wants to make substantial contributions to the future of humankind. So if the people who are currently in dire poverty can be brought up to what is today a lower middle class standard of living, that could help them think more creatively, think longer term. They would be higher up along Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or whatever hierarchy of needs one subscribes to. So I think there is an important role to this. Now, I think this would be a good bridge to your discussion of some of the specific initiatives that you have been pursuing with Suki 222. And I would ask you to tell us a bit more about those projects and what led you to focus on those particular areas.
Sure. Thank you. Well, when I got back in 2014 from my 4.5, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it was, journey across the states, I was wired, and my family, after a couple of days, I came back California style, thinking that this wild experience that I had, which was really wild, I came back with tears of joy, thinking that, okay, I'm going to get my car, I'm going to paint it with the 222 on there, and I'm going to put elephant ears on it, and I'm going to drive it honking the horn all the way to DC and get this movement going. You know, I'm going to play the music loud, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to express. And when I got back, they said, Charles, you're sick. You need to go in the hospital. So they put me in and they diagnosed me bipolar, right? So, and I knew that was going to happen when I was taking every step of the way here. Really, I figured that people, they nobody understands why I'm always carrying in my compassion levels up, and I'm not trying to cut through, because I things have come easy. I was born with a leg up. I was lower middle class, but I got an education to the degree that I would accept it. You know, I had an IQ that would give me opportunity. I was tall, I was white, you know, and I was male and competent. I'm not knocking myself, and what I got, you know, by working hard. But when I got back and I got in the hospital, then I was medicated, and I was over medicated to where I thought I was 20 years older. I thought I was 90 years old. And my body was shot, and I had taken up smoking cigarettes and mixing it with my weed. And I came back, and I went to a friend's house. I had built an apartment on the side of her house when I was, and so I rented it from her, and I stayed in that, and I could rarely get out of bed for a year. I'd get up, I'd walk a 60 steps, think I'd done something, come back, pull a couple weeds, and go back and zone out. So, but after a year, I said, okay, I'm getting a little stronger, and I forced myself back into society a little bit, and I came through with this mantra 222, and it through that recovery and being able, I came back, I had one house left. I had gone through most of my fortune. I had already made my fortune. I had spent most of it, but I had one house here that was in a zoned area that I could rent out as an Airbnb. So I remodeled the house. I made that happen, and I building my strength back up. And so then I had a little more financial stability. I hadn't ruined my credit, but I was building it back up. And I said, okay, it's time for me to go back out there. And through social media, I'm going to write what I considered a white paper. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. And I had with my two sons, I had formed the nonprofit at the time, as you say, Project 222. And then when I put it on LinkedIn in March of 2018, I said, I'm looking for the best and the brightest minds to work on how to do this. And I went into different description. I since hit a button and it erased, and I had to rewrite it. But I started reaching out to people that were highly skilled in education, in emergency relief, in humanitarian efforts, in third world countries. I say third world, it's not third world, it's just developing countries. And when I started, they were called third world, and that was in 2005. But anyway, I got, as I got stronger and I got some funding, and I started talking to these people. I made contacts in Ghana and in Cameroon and in other African countries primarily, but they were from people that needed help, but we're on the edge of the lower middle class helping the very, very extreme poor. And so through relationships I made in Ghana with Emmanuel Adam Jr., just a regular guy, he says, hey, there's a population, the villages, they're drinking surface water. He went out there, he showed me, took pictures of the area. So I got a clear understanding of what conditions these people didn't have clean water. So I sent, well, about the same time, I got a call from the founder of Veterans Without Orders, with an O. And they work in developing countries, remote areas that don't have clean water. They have water, but it has bacteria in it. And they had discovered a manufacturer, in fact, here in Tampa, that makes a nanotechnology micron filter that takes out 99.9% of the bacteria, has no moving parts, and it gravity fed, and it will filter 5 gallons in 20 minutes bacteria-free water. So let's just say 100 gallons a day, more than that, but depending on how much you use it. Well, at 2 gallons, that's 50 people per filter, right? So we sent some over. They distributed them. They trained the people how to use them. They got volunteers of their own, and then they went back months later, and got interviews from the population talking about the reduction in cholera and typhoid and many other waterborne illnesses. So we had a successful pilot project. Now, the thing is, these filters cost here in Tampa, they'll fit in a purse, 3 of them will, and they cost $22 a piece. So what we're able to do is put a filter, and it works out to pennies per person per year for 2 gallons of water a day. And so we don't give one for 50. We try to figure one filter for each 10 people as an average, because 10 people are often living in that same family unit. So, but it still works out to 10 pennies per person per year. The filter is a lifetime filter. It doesn't wear out. The plastic eventually would disintegrate, but that's after years. So, the population still has to walk the water 4 or 5 kilometers back to the village, but they have donkeys that pull the carts of the 50-gallon drums, and you can see it on the Instagram. But
so Ramona, I think this is a good time to share some of the Instagram images from Charles so that our viewers can see some of the filters as well as the people's responses to them. So Charles, which picture would you like to focus on your profile?
Right. If you can can we look at the Instagram photos as a whole? And I think it's like the 4th one in or the 5th one in. So that what you see there is just the extraction of the water filter. It's made by Sawyer. It's called a 0.1 filter. And as I say, it has a flow rate of 15 gallons per hour, and is simple to use. It requires a 5-gallon bucket. So one thing that we do is we send the filter, and then they have to purchase the buckets locally. So sometimes we'll provide the funds for that, but we've on the Ghana project. And if you go to the next slide, I think you see, yeah, well, that's actually, that picture's in front of the White House at the peace vigil I mentioned. That's Filippo's. He's probably still there, or Craig Thompson. There's a fraternity of vigil keepers that have kept that vigil going. And what's the next slide? If that, yeah. So these are the filters. Those are the buckets that I mentioned, and they require a electric drill. The kit comes with a bit that you just, towards the bottom of the bucket, an inch or so up, you drill a hole with the bit provided, and then you put the attachment in with the washers provided, and it seals the bucket, and then you pour the water in the top, and then the clean water comes out. So she's there, she's teaching that, and we try to get the filters in the hands of the through the hands of the village leader, the local authority, and the school principal. And so we center those filters, make sure the school has it, and then we put them in as many as we can into the common areas of the village, and into the households that need them most. We don't have enough for everybody, and then we look at scaling that up once we have the images and the data. So yeah, so the idea, I mentioned schools, and we'll be sending some filters. We have them actually in transit now that are going to Cameroon and to Kathmandu. And there's a proposal now that I was talking with the journalist in Tanzania that has identified a school there that has a bacteria in the water, and that the filter would be appropriate. And so he's got connections at the school with the local government, and he has done a little documentary film on water conditions there. So that's how we're spreading out through social media. The LinkedIn got us started. And now we also had some successful failures to where we got aid to people, but we're unable to sustain it because the volunteer base was not sophisticated enough, didn't have the right contacts, and even so, they're in an area of violence, and so it's not even safe to go into the area to operate. So yeah, that's those kids right there. That's their first drink of clean water, and they're all clamoring around the thong. Can you go to the next? Yeah. See that those are the buckets that they purchased there. You see that it's Suki 222, but it also says Rotary Club. And when we were in Ghana, after we sent the 10 buckets, we got the results back. We decided to send about 88 more, I think it ended up, a couple for the people that are volunteers, because when they go into these remote areas, they need to filter themselves, unless they're going to carry bottled water. And we all know what that is problems are, besides the cost. So the Rotary Club, yeah, there's the water source right there. And so they carry that into the buckets, and then but the Rotary Club, due to COVID, the lockdown halted our operations, and when the curfew lifted, or the restrictions lifted, then the Rotary Club stepped in to help us distribute the filters that we already had there on the ground. And that's something that I am something we're doing, is we're identifying other nonprofits in the area that are trying to assist the same population that doesn't have clean water, whether they're trying to assist them with women's rights or children's rights or education or healthcare, the environment. Whoever's working in that area, 222 wants to go in and collaborate with those either directly or at least in a usable fashion. And what we'll do is, as we market our effort, as our social media visibility comes up, and I think it will, we're going to replicate what you see there in Ghana. Very simple, but you see that we've partnered with one of the largest organizations. They have, I think, 1.4 million volunteers, the Rotary Club does, and they operate in most countries, and they're waning down on their malaria fight, polio fight. That was their big thing since, I think, the 50s, and it's about underway. So they're turning to look at water projects. So I think that those countries that don't have big organizations are well funded, and we offer them filters that I think they'll cooperate. Yeah, those are the kids the first time that little video right there. I love it. You wonder, like, what the heck are they doing? That's an unruly bunch, right? And the schoolmaster comes over, tells them, okay, get in a line. And I think they're all, I can't see, but they're all carrying their cups, So yeah, that makes me feel good. So the, where was I? It distracted me. So the Rotary Club is capable, and they have resources, and they have ability to get funding to make a real impact in these communities, as well as the Lions Club or any other organization. If they see that we're using technology to benefit, affordable technology to benefit the people that they are saying that they're trying to benefit, I think that they'll be part of our organization in some form of memorandum of understanding, which will give us more visibility, and which, when we get visibility, we have full transparency on how any funding that comes into Suki 222 is distributed. So the idea is that's a school in Ghana. We have filters that say going to a school in Nepal, and we have filters going to a school in Cameroon and some orphanages there. And also we've made good connections here just the other day in Kenya. So we'll have 4, maybe 5 countries with evidence of the effectiveness of the filter. And by February 22nd, 2022, we'll get back to that. But I hope to be in 22 schools in 22 countries, a minimum of 22 schools, but be active in 22 countries through these local organizations, just with small projects of water. And then we can start on the project, start introducing some personalities within the village that are affected by the water. And we'll have the students at the schools create artwork that can be auctioned off to help raise funds for phase 2 of the project, which would be a more sustainable system that would involve transportation and maybe energy, because a lot of these areas, they don't have lights at night. They don't have the ability to charge a computer. So we're looking at, besides the water filters, being able to go in and put a solar package there so that they could enter into a better communication with the world. And there's talk of, as long as these schools are teaching literacy and language, that they could teach, maybe parallel to that, coding, because the brain's working in similar fashions. If you're learning language, apparently the coding is some of those same complementary learning sectors. So, and I'm just taking that by things that I've heard, and getting educated on different ways to affect change. And it goes back to education. But first, in order to be educated, you have to have 222. So the educators like this, and where I mentioned the board of directors here was my son and myself, my two sons and myself. Because of LinkedIn, we expanded, and Ronnie El Sheikh in Australia came on board. And then here just recently, Helen Papper, who has a background with the UN broadcasting, she set up the radio broadcasts in South Sudan back in, I think it was the 80s. And she's really powerful. She lives in Paris, and she's got great connections and experiences. And she's joined us as a board advisor. And one of the projects we're doing now in Cameroon is in the hands of Mumsy Tutu, is her name, Toutou. But she's also joined the 222 group, and she is just an individual that was raised in Cameroon standards as a wealthy, and she lives here in Chicago. But she has 4 orphanages that she supports in Cameroon, and she started a school, and she sends over 1,000 kids a year to school, which costs per student in Cameroon $10 per year per student is all it costs. And then she's doing a fundraiser now, trying to send 10,000 kids to school next year. But she goes in with bodyguards. She's in the peaceful part of Cameroon where there's not civil war, but she still has to hire 2 bodyguards and trucks to go through the jungle like you've never seen before to get to the areas that she's working. So we're looking there to besides the water filters, and the distance in phase 2 to put a small solar array and some electrical devices. So yeah, those are some of the things we're doing.
Yes, thank you, Charles, for that extensive narrative of the many projects that you are pursuing, and definitely based on the images and the video that you shared, the impact on the lives of the people in those communities in Ghana has been quite palpable. I will also note that we did hold a virtual Enlightenment Salon with Emmanuel Adam Awo Jr., who was your collaborator on that initiative. On October 25th, 2020, we had a conversation with him and also with our friend Osinakachi Akuma Kalu of Nigeria. So I linked to that recording in the chat. For those viewers who are interested in Suki 222, please watch that salon as well. I do think that the amount of improvement that you were able to bring to those people was certainly immense, and it was of a nature that many of them hadn't seen before, which is remarkable. Now, Jason asks in our chat for you to confirm whether indeed the filters cost $22.
Well, they're actually $21.50. I think they retail for about $65 if you go to Sports Authority or something. But the cost is actually 20. I cheat. I say 22.
Yeah. Yes, so that we can have twos everywhere. Now, I did want to ask you, though, with regard to the impact of the pandemic, because I understand the disruption to global shipping has been so considerable as to make any shipments to Africa prohibitively expensive. I had a situation where I was seeking to mail a $5 running medal to a person in Africa, and I was quoted a shipping cost of $125 for that little medal. And I would imagine a filter, which is a bit more voluminous, would be even more expensive to ship. So have you been able to find a workaround for that, or have you been required essentially to suspend activities until the shipping costs become more reasonable?
No, actually, we the Nepal Kathmandu shipment that went out this week was $165 for 22 filters. So it's still, $8 a piece, which, it would be much better if it was 2 or 3. But if I did my math right, but it's still not prohibitive to ship, because the filters themselves are so large cost. The more expensive item than that, even, and it could be between $12 and $25, are the 5-gallon buckets, because we don't ship those, or it would be expensive because of the volume. But the filters are so light and they fit in a small enough box that it probably doesn't get charged much more than an envelope, more certainly, but that's Nepal. I don't know what, I haven't shipped into Africa recently. The filter's going to Cameroon. I shipped to Chicago, and then someone's going over there and actually going in to deploy them themselves. But that's one way to get around it, is carry on. These filters, you could probably fit, 60, 70 of them in a carry on. So it's they're very lightweight and small. So from the good, even if it was $600, if I could get 100 filters over there, it would still be worth it,
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm glad that you have been able to find various methods, and it's interesting also that the shipment to Nepal was of 22 filters. I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Gennady, when someone's really trying to make a point, when they pause and they say, in order to save the world, 222 save the world. I love it.
Yes, indeed. I wonder how many other twos we will be able to insert into this conversation.
You can't avoid them after a while. When if it could actually be annoying to somebody if they've been called on it, and then I say annoying and cleverly annoying, but it's catchy. 22 countries, 22 filters, and then phase 2 that's the thing. Once we receive the attention of a major funder and says those metrics that you're using, let's see how you can scale that, right? So do we go to 222 filters or 2,000 filters? The company can make 7,000 a week, right? So then if you say there's a couple 100 million people that are drinking surface water, let's just say it's 100 million, and 10 people per filter, the filters are, we can use the production for a while. Now there's other methods of filtration. The filters won't take out metal, for instance, so it doesn't do any good for other toxins or viruses, but it does take out the bacteria. So we have to look. It's going to be all about the data. What the solution or what the technology is capable of. What the cost is. Whether or not we're supplying the proper solution. Whether or not we're empowering the right people to have that solution and maintain it, and are we educating the people enough that they see the interconnectedness of that and hygiene, and you have to change behavior, open defecation. You're dealing with everything at a base level, because people at this point have had any opportunity or very little outside influence. You're talking about human potential. One of my friends, one of the most intelligent people I know, is from Tanzania, that grew up on a dirt floor, that at the age of 13 was discovered by Peace Corps, and knew physics already by himself. He's a philosopher. He's a brilliant guy. But there are many people like that. In fact, he said, Charles, I wasn't the smartest in my village. My best friend, he got eaten by a lion. You're right. I mean, so you're dealing with that extreme, like, wow, you're brilliant. You could do anything, to the next night a lion eats you, right? So you're dealing with that edge of survival for many different reasons. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But the Cameroon thing is it's a documentary in the making, and many of these areas are. As we get footage back that is more compelling than the footage you see in the Instagram, and it also has a balance sheet of the cost and effect and the number of people served and all that data that we should have. I mean, I've got it more or less in my head because with the size of the project, I'm comfortable financing that small portion in order to give the people that have said, yes, I want to help. This is what we need. This is, and given me a full understanding of the situation. I want to empower them with something. And again, if a journalist is in that country, which we have a good connection in Tanzania now, we'll get coverage and then we'll start getting some attention.
Yes, indeed. So we have a variety of questions about the filters. First of all, Jason Geringer is curious if the filters can be produced in Africa, and in particular, if they could be 3D printed, again, with a focus on saving on the costs of shipping, as well as enabling local production to scale up so that they can get to more people and more communities.
Well, I've asked that question myself of not of the company, but is it something that we could produce in Africa? It doesn't create very many jobs. First of all, the plant is fairly, most of it's automated, and down the road, I would see, what I would like to do is partner with Sawyer. So if we can show them, I was a commodity broker, right? So if we can show somebody volume of flow of product, then we can say, Sawyer, would you like to sit up there in cooperation with the Tanzanian Water Authority or something, East African. So that's certainly a possibility. Right now, I can't move all the production of the one plant. But if we can say, okay, here is a global initiative, first of all, it would be what other manufacturers of similar technology at a competitive price can we sell for? So let's use all of that resource. And at the same time, I mentioned, but it bears worth mentioning, we don't want to send the wrong product to the wrong place. So the amount of research that needs done is greatly benefited by the amount of research that has already been done. So what research needs to be done is okay, what research has been done, right? And it's pretty much proven method. We're not dealing with anything that hasn't been proven. If you get water, the individual is a healthy person. But yeah, so that's why it's important to work with the local community that knows what's going on and wants to help a specific area, specific village, and have identified the need. Now, a lot of times they don't know what the solution is, right? So then you look at best practices, and again, that's what we did with the other NGO, and then so it's all about connecting the existing effort, the amount of money that is spent, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars that are spent in related efforts that would be positively impacted if that constituency had the basic needs. So yeah, I'm all about making the filters, but it's also identifying other technologies in parallel at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And Alexandria Black is interested in how much regular maintenance does the filtration system need? And I would add to that question, for whatever maintenance is necessary, do you believe that the local populations will have the skill sets among them to maintain the filters, or will they require outside assistance, experts, technicians coming in periodically?
Well, and that's a great question, and it would go for any technology that we would be deploying, right? And so all of those questions are necessary. In the case of the filter, it comes with a backwash syringe, so that fits in. So you it doesn't need it that often, depending on the amount of sediment in the water. Preferably, you take it off the top where there's not sand and stuff in it. But you use the filter, you backwash it, and then you use it again. So there are no parts that wear out. The mechanism to clean it is already in the package with it. So yeah, it doesn't wear out, and until the syringe wears out, then you have to blow it through it by hand, I guess. But in fact, I'm going to talk to the manufacturer and see if they would put 2 syringes in there. And just because it's the weakest link, it may not wear out for a year or 2, but you still, they could keep one. But then you have to, again, educate them that don't leave it out in the sun, or it's not going to be, you have to keep these things from from where becoming brittle and whatnot. But that's a technical thing that doesn't require. But on the filters and the other technology, the scenario that I see is the filters go in, they get the school, they help the village get healthier, they reduce disease, but they're still carrying the water. So when we do finance the project to either dig the well or to make the water catchment systems, whatever the experts in that area are doing successfully, or other areas are doing successfully in like conditions, we would once that project was in place, you still have these filters that are good for a lifetime. So we would move those filters out to a more remote area and then leapfrog, piggyback on that. So it's not only does those filters work for a year or 2 in one area, they can be moved to another. And to make them forever so the plastic doesn't deteriorate, could they make a metal version and all of that? I don't know, but all I know is it's nanotechnology, and it works for a long time, and it doesn't require training other than, I have to keep it clean. And we go ahead and drill the bucket with the hole a certain distance off the bottom so it doesn't get the sediment. So yeah, it's fairly maintenance free, except for that backwash periodically.
Yes, thank you, Charles. And I do think this is quite a promising technology for scaling up across African communities, as well as impoverished communities in other parts of the world. Now, some of our viewers have been quite interested in finding out how Suki 222 or a similar initiative could be applied in the United States as well. So Mike Lazine asks, for instance, have you been able to speak with any mayors of cities like New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago or some others that have some serious problems with a rising homeless population? And Jason also echoes this, and he says he doesn't want to sound insensitive to poverty in other nations, but he's curious about how we could use 222 to help people in large cities like Los Angeles. Of course, the homelessness crisis has just skyrocketed in recent years, and the pandemic has made it worse because a lot of people have lost their homes involuntarily due to being unable to work for a living, being prohibited from working for a living because of the lockdowns. And then to add to that, we now have a lumber shortage, and lumber prices have tripled over the past year, making new home construction, at least using traditional techniques, extremely expensive. So what are some potential solutions to these problems, and how can 222, at least the framework of that approach, contribute to those solutions?
Sure, that's a great question, and it is something that I get asked often. So if we just go with the math again, there are schools that don't have clean water. Now there's one up in Illinois that the woman that has the orphanages in Cameroon, she's also active, and her nonprofit is active in Illinois at a school that is underprivileged, right? So she would actually put a proposal together and say, okay, here's the conditions, and I've consulted with these experts, and these are the other nonprofits, and here's the situation. And then we would show that situation on our website and begin that discussion on what it's going to take to get clean water to that school in Illinois that has lead in the water. You know, what government policies are in place or proposed in order to address that? You know, can we draw focus to that as we get a platform, as 222 goes viral? That's what we have to anticipate. Then what criteria do we look at? Is it any different than the criteria we use in Africa or Asia or anywhere else? And I don't think it is. It is, does that individual have dignified access to 222? And if not, then that's an area that we say, wow, we can help there, because that we can measure. You know, what can you do? So then we do a request for proposals from this collaborative of nonprofits in coordination with the school that has government contact. And so that would be the framework of our request for proposals would have that in it. And I would encourage it. And I've slept in the streets of New York and DC and a few other cities, you know, intentionally. And so I get it, what those people need, and they don't need much, you know, that they just need enough. And now I say after that, you know, then it's education on we really have to change a lot of our behavior in this coming decade. And so, you know, we're the haves, you know, we're the developed country, right? Everybody, we have everything we need, except for a few 100,000 kids and a few million, many millions others that they don't have what they have. So again, we're focusing on schools in other countries. We'd focus on schools here in the U.S. that are underprivileged schools, underserved, for where the children don't have adequate nutrition or shelter. I mean, we're going to go beyond the schools, but I think that it's a good theme that we can carry into our launch.
Yes, thank you. Now, what suggestions would you have for overcoming the housing shortage brought about in part by the scarcity of lumber, in part by certain restrictions on development here in the United States? Because there are serious concerns that housing is becoming unaffordable for large segments of the population. And unless a lot of new supply is constructed quickly, I do fear that the homelessness crisis will expand, and even the quality of life for those who do manage to stay in their homes would be diminished. Do you think there's a possibility, for instance, to deploy construction approaches that do not require lumber, building homes out of different materials whose manufacture can be scaled up to a greater extent? Because it does seem a bit strange to me that in the 21st century, wood is such a commonplace building material still. I read recently that wood is even required in order to pour concrete, that somehow at least the frameworks around the
form boards, yeah.
Yes, they are still made of wood. And I'm thinking, could there be any approaches that overcome our dependence on this one type of very old and very common construction material? But surely we can do better in the 21st century. What do you think?
Well, Yeah, well, that's where I said, in the profession, I wanted to use, wood as a polymer, I guess, but I wanted to use a polymer that could go into the shape, that inflatable in every detail, and it not only to build it. One of the criteria would be affordable, but and quick, and sustainable. So I think that technology is out there, and there are. One of the comments I made, we won the business competition for PolySmart, the shelter, and it was just a 10 by 10 cube that we said we could build that in a certain, I think, 4 or 5 years, and then Hurricane Katrina had just been through and leveled New Orleans, I think it was, and it was like 2005, and so there were 70,000 trailers in the formaldehyde-laden trailers in somewhere in New Orleans that couldn't be deployed because they'd gotten wet, and the outgassing from the wood particle board was toxic, and so we had this concept of these polymers that wouldn't outgas. That was part of the criteria for our testing, that we wouldn't deploy them until all these other building restrictions and codes were addressed. We won the business competition against a coal fusion, COAL, coal fusion technology, as well as a ceramic filter for factory stacks. And so we won the competition, but the newspaper, when they said, PolySmart won the deal, ... Charles Holsopple, that said the name of the students. And then the only really body of it they said was that the judges criticized it because there were 15,000 unsold inventory items unaccounted for. So that would, how are you going to pay for that? They were accounted for, but the cost of carrying those units wasn't included. And at the same time, in real life, there's 70,000 trailers down there that at cost of 100,000 a piece that are useless. And then the other thing that when I was interviewed by the newspaper, the only thing they printed is when I said there's dozens of ways to build structure. We need to build the understanding of the community. And then it died. So the ways of building and the cost of those structures is, there are new technologies out there, but the formula for housing is cost per square foot, right? So I think people will be living in less square footage and possibly not in the area that they want to live in because of the cost of housing. But as I say, I came out of the lumber business, and this market move, I would be, either making millions or losing millions right now if I was still in the lumber business. But yeah, housing is a major issue. I mean, it already is for about 1 billion people, right? When we back up and look at it, and what are jobs going to be in the next 10 years? How many truck drivers are going to be out of work? How many cab drivers? There's a whole revolution coming on in the way that we make our income, and there's not a major revolution coming on in the way we spend our income. We're still paying for those basic needs. So I see conflict ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I think it would be important to rapidly build out the housing supply in the United States. And I'm quite interested in any emerging technologies that are able to achieve that. I think it would be great if 3D printers could be deployed in mass to essentially construct tracts of homes. There have already been 3D printed houses created in various experimental communities. And at that point, I believe these homes should simply be given away to the people who are homeless. Essentially, instead of the current approach to public housing, where people are deprived of it as soon as they have a certain level of income, and that actually creates a disincentive for them to better their lives. If one just gives the person the title to that house, then that person is free to essentially develop his or her life, his or her financial well-being, acquire other property from there. The U.S. Transhumanist Party has proposed essentially constructing homes for the entire homeless population. Of course, there would be some conditions in those communities. If you are a person who has been gifted a house in that community, you would be prohibited from bringing drugs or alcohol into that community. There might be community initiatives like litter cleanup events that people would participate in. And in that way, they would earn the value of that home, and they would also contribute in positive ways to addressing some of the negative externalities that exist in that community, litter being a large problem, but also other kinds of maintenance work that they then could use the skills they gained from in order to get remunerative employment elsewhere. So I think that would be a great way to address the homelessness crisis in the United States. Of course, it would require a lot of institutional reform. It would require lifting the restrictions on new development. It would require greatly liberalizing the local zoning laws and essentially acknowledging we have a dire situation here. Let's build all of these new homes. Let's make sure that nobody lacks the basic necessities of shelter. And I think that's going to help with housing affordability across the board, because then fewer people would be competing for other types of housing. And as a result, the prices of those would tend to become more affordable as well.
Yeah, the cost of housing someone is actually less, in giving them a house over the course of their time of being homeless is I'm sure a positive deal. And if you can empower those people with housing, then now all new houses don't have to be built. The number of abandoned and empty buildings that could be retrofitted, that's what I was talking to the reporter when I said there's many different ways to build it. That's the only thing that he said. He didn't mention the possibility of it revolutionizing things. So new technologies are very difficult to get into the construction industry. And as you mentioned, wood is been used a long time. Now they're using more engineered lumber, and so you can use more of the tree for a structural purpose and whatnot. But lumber's not going to go away. It is one of the more replenishable products if farmed responsibly with mixed species and whatnot. We're cutting down third and fourth generation spruce and pine trees now. So it is wasteful, but now they're coming up with more panelized systems that eliminate the waste at the factory that go out and are quicker to assemble. Wood is very pliable. You can be used for many purposes, cut and whittled and whatnot. So it's not going away. And then when you get into you get into petroleum products. But if we can use the cellulose of the tree better, or if we can use hemp instead of trees, and we can get a better cycle. And then if we're open to other types of dwellings, I don't know about you, when I go to a different part of the country or the world, and I see a really cool little place that maybe I could stay in for the night, I think I'm always thinking I could live there. Just give me something that's attractive, that has some art to it, that has that ergonomic feel to it, if that's the right word. So it doesn't have to be big. And actually, then you have the craving for community. So it's not just about structure; it's about the urban planning, and it's about the waste systems. So it is a complex infrastructure, particularly when you get into New York. But then it gets down to, okay, here's all the data that affects the homeless, and here's the number of people, and here are candidate methodologies that we could deal with. Now, if a community came up to Suki 222, whether it be New York or Timbuktu, we would look at it under the same criteria of where is the baseline individual and how would this improve that, and how sustainable is it? And what are other options that either are alternative options or can be blended between the different programs and take the strength.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And it's interesting as well that you mention essentially some more sustainable techniques that have been developed for producing lumber. John Halloran in our chat mentioned bamboo as well, and he points out that bamboo is actually a grass. It grows really well. It's easy on the environment. Do you think that can help with the lumber shortage? Bamboo is quite durable also.
It is, and they say it's stronger than steel in some conditions, you know. So, and I'm not a bamboo expert, but I was talking to a woman that I'd met on Clubhouse the other day, and she had her backdrop of a huge bamboo city, and it was in Indonesia or something, and it's almost done, but it was started by the Venus Project. I forget his name, but he passed away a couple of years ago.
Jacques Fresco. Yes.
Yeah. So, and he was, this structure was out of bamboo, and, you know, multi-level with terraces and everything. It was unbelievable. I haven't seen it, and I don't think it's completed yet, but the imagination, if it's linked with the right material, we can make some fascinating things. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it all gets back to our, I don't know, the limbic brain, right? Isn't that where we make our decisions, and that maybe sometimes we should make, sometimes we don't. It's just, that's our strong sector. I think we have to educate that as to what we think makes us peaceful and secure and happy is more accurately represented in our reality. Because at this point, we get sold many different options that are false equivalents that we don't have to make. I mean, there's always something that creativity will allow and help us adapt, I believe. And that's what we need. We need all of the different options put on the table, and then all of the consequences, both positive and negative, put on the table, and come up with the best solution as soon as possible to what's most urgent and necessary, back to 222.
Yes, thank you, Charles. And it's interesting that you mention the Venus Project. You also mention renovations of existing housing stock and bringing some currently dilapidated homes into livable condition. One of the individuals who is a close friend of the U.S. Transhumanist Party and whom we endorsed just a few weeks ago to run for mayor of Camden, New Jersey, is Jennifer Hughes, who also has experience with home renovations. And she points out that in Camden, there's a significant housing stock of older homes that are sometimes in poor condition, but with a bit of work could be brought to a really nice level of quality. So one of her positions when running for mayor is to actually bring about these renovations and train the local population
Nice.
in regard to how to do that. She also had volunteered for the Venus Project for a number of years and had actually met Jacques Fresco. I'm actually curious if there's room for collaboration between 222 and the Venus Project, because in many respects, you seem to be aligned, particularly in regard to providing sustainable shelter for as many people as possible.
Yeah, the I first became aware of the Venus Project pretty much right when I started, because I was looking at all the alternative housing solutions and technologies. But in fact, I went down there to try to find them, back in 2010, I think. And they're out in their remote area. Then I tried to call them, and I really didn't get much. But that's 10 years ago. But I couldn't gain traction. I didn't have 222, right? I didn't have that simple little catch. And I didn't have any experience in working in developing countries, or I didn't have the time in the street, or I think the ability, hopefully, to communicate the process that I'm advocating. So I think when they see it, then they'll relate to it. Yes. And then it's most people do. They don't have to be in the housing sector or the water sector. They just, oh yeah, food, water, shelter. I see that's a requirement. Yeah. And maybe we can do it. Maybe we can't. You have different opinions on that, but Jacques and I and you and I think all the transhumanists say that, yeah, there's room enough on the planet for the population. We just have to be smarter about it and think about this as well as future generations. Particularly if I'm going to be part of the generation 2,000 years from now, I need to take care of. I need to have something there when I get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, that's what we keep telling people about the pursuit of life extension. If lifespans become dramatically longer, people will have a greater sense of long-term responsibility, and they will
right.
be personally invested in preventing environmental calamities or other long-term societal problems. And what you said is a great manifestation of that. And hopefully a lot of initiatives that are focused on improving human quality of life can collaborate in these respects. Jason mentioned that Matt Damon is the founder of an initiative called water.org. Are you familiar with that? And do you think there's any room for collaboration or alignment in your missions?
Yeah, Matt Damon's work. I forget the water. Yeah. Also, Scott Harrison has Charity Water. So, and I was asked, what would you do with $1 million if somebody brought it to you right now? I'd say, well, I think I can execute around $22,000 worth, fairly quickly. But I would take the rest and ask Steve Harrison at Charity Water and a couple of other NGOs that I trust to use it as soon as possible to affect those suffering below 222. Because there's other organizations like Matt Damon's and like Sean Penn and Bill Gates and a lot of Angelina Jolie, Oprah, all of these organizations, when they hear of 222, my plan, as opposed to going and knocking every door and getting sick in the street again, is to use this little thing that we're talking on now to get through to enough people that they'll hear of 222 from somebody that has their ear, and they may just tell that person, hey, go check that out, and then when they check it out, and we do have now people looking at it that have first round funding of between 25 and 100,000, and second round up to $1 million, and third round well over that. So we're on the radar of those organizations that are made up of people that have many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. So there's the first billionaire, if he hasn't heard of 222 yet, he will very soon. And then there's a certain amount of them that will be curious to say, hey, that just may work, or at least I see it working in incremental amounts, given X amount of dollars put into it. And so, yeah, it's the next biggest thing, I think, that is coming pretty quick,
Yes, I think you would have a decent chance of attracting some wealthy philanthropists to this cause, as long as they don't have too much of a desire to control the actual process of how aid gets distributed. I think that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks with large donors. When you have a large donor to a particular initiative, or a senior partner, a multimillionaire or a billionaire with a lot of money, they seem to think they themselves either know or could arrive at all of the answers and hire their own team of experts. And it's kind of difficult for them sometimes to recognize that there are already smaller scale initiatives that have tried out a lot of these approaches and have had successes that can be remarkable if scaled up further, and all that they need are some additional resources to make that happen. We have that in the anti-aging rejuvenation biotechnology field as well, where there are scientists such as Aubrey de Grey and Bill Andrews and Greg Fahey and various others who have been working in this field for decades. And they have lamented at various times that initiatives like Google's Calico, for example, have not really devoted a lot of funds to these existing philanthropic and research initiatives, because likely the billionaires behind them think they could do everything themselves and reinvent the wheel from scratch, which apparently is what Calico has been trying to do behind the scenes. But if they collaborated with the existing researchers, they could get a much higher return much more quickly by trusting the people who have been doing this work. So that's what I hope will happen to you, Charles, that the donors you attract will be able to see the proofs of concept that you have provided and essentially say, we're going to let this person run with this concept at a much greater scale and provide him with the funds and other logistical support to do that. Now, Alexandria also points out some alternative building materials are hemp wood and hempcrete. Right. And mushrooms can also be cultured into building materials. So what do you know about that?
Well, I've heard of the mushroom thing, that psyllium, I think, fiber, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know that could be taken to scale but the hemp on another hempcrete, it does have great building properties. I don't know all the details on it, but it's supposed to be fireproof and rot proof and lightweight and has many properties that are good. I don't know the negatives on it yet, but I'm very interested in hempcrete. Yeah. And as you say, bamboo. But the mushrooms, I like mushrooms for all kinds of reasons, but I'm a little afraid of them sometimes. So I would have to be convinced that the mushrooms could withstand hurricane force and heavy moisture content, without mold or decay. So I'd put it through the same test as I would anything else, backward and forward. Yeah.
Yes, well, that is what the scientific method is about, rigorously testing a hypothesis that one has about a material. So I do hope that someone conducts these kinds of tests or has conducted them already. Now, speaking of bamboo, Mike Lazine is wondering, is bamboo strong enough to be the skeleton for high-rise buildings? He thinks steel will always rule for high-rise buildings, stadiums, and other large structures like that. What do you think? Will any of these materials become an alternative to steel anytime soon?
Well, I've seen some structures. I think they're in Bali, a school. It's like 3 or 4 floors. But but this picture I saw of the Venus project over in Malaysia somewhere, it was 16 stories tall or something like that. You know, the woman said it was designed to hold like 2,300 or 3,000 people, or maybe more. And it had, you know, outside terraces but she said it was all made of bamboo. Again, I haven't seen the prints. I haven't been there or anything else. So sometimes you hear on the internet, even from somebody that's well-meaning, you can get bad information. And I don't want to be that person at this point. But I've seen representations of bamboo. Well, I've seen the actual thing, 3 floors and more. But I've seen a photo, which I think, or a rendering of the project in its completion, which is multiple stories, and I've seen it under construction in a photo from far away that had the basic structure down for that high rise, and it had a lot of curves to it. It was a beautiful organic looking building. So, you know, I'm sure you don't use the same webbing and framework for a bamboo building as you do for a wood, a conforming wood, which is more post and beam, or the steel or concrete. But if you work within that material's properties, well, I think you're on the right path.
Interesting. And indeed, hopefully we can get some additional information in the future about these construction techniques using bamboo, and to what extent more advanced, larger scale building designs are possible. Now, a few questions have arisen on the subject of water, and Alexandria Black states that water wars are a real phenomenon, and is asking, have you seen any resistance from entities that try to control populations via water access? Johnny Vargas in our YouTube chat also states that water rights are going to be a big issue in the coming years. So how have you seen that issue play out, whether that be in the countries where Suki 222 is active, like Ghana and Cameroon and Nepal, or in the United States even, where there are definitely certain clashes over water rights, even in places like Nevada, which are more arid than other parts of the country?
Yeah, at this point, we haven't run into any of that because we're operating on a small scale. And we're not an NGO working directly within their country. We're just sending the filters over to an individual, and then they're doing it. So as soon as we start operating at a larger scale, the government's going to or industry or somebody that sees a threat by us giving these filters out and not purchasing, for instance, So as we expand those, that I had a conversation with somebody today that's I asked the question. He's an attorney and a professor, and I said, who is going to be opposed to 222? Where am I going to find the resistance? Because I think that's important to know going in. And I think everybody's going to have a certain amount of resistance to it. Like, if it was that simple, wouldn't we be already doing it? And there's others that will say, maybe legitimately so, that their livelihood is threatened if this is successful. I don't think they'll see that right away. I think they'll kind of ignore us, and that. But the way I think it's going to go is when we do get that mean, and 222 is understood in every language, to where people say it makes sense, right? So and it seems doable. So I think it's obvious of what problems it would solve. So what my job is alternative conflict resolution specialist, which is what one of the things I call myself, is to talk to both parties and say, you know, what is your long-term goal? What's your mission? What's your vision? What's your values? And then see if I can help them achieve their objectives through a healthy population. You know, what we're going to do is we're going to increase a consumer base, right? Through food, water, shelter, ingenuity, and opportunity, that then those consumers will be able to enter into some sort of monetary exchange for basic goods. So if it plays out, it's in everybody's best interest, except for those that want everything and more, or those that actually want to cause harm to people. So, you know, I think is that 1% of the population are sociopaths, that they don't have any empathy. It's just not something that is in their makeup. Now, a certain percentage of those are very, very bright, maybe a higher percentage than normal. And they are often given positions of authority within corporations to execute the dirty part of running a for-profit, only for-profit business. And so, yeah, alternative conflict resolution within the individual that may not have any empathetic direction. You know, they say, well, that, you know, I don't care about that. You know, it's not something that I'm going to make a decision on. And they have a position of power, whether they be in politics or running a major corporation. If the information that they're making their decision on that they don't care about is made public, and the general population would care about it and say, hey, you know, we don't care if you make that extra 220 million in profit. Those actions are costing us as taxpayers, perhaps, billions, as well as future generations. So we're going to put you out of business. So I think 222 is got a marketing power that can, as long as we're operating on facts, and not just the facts, but all the possible facts that we can accumulate, and then extrapolate the data out and show how it works throughout the economy, and how it doesn't take away the basic needs of the supply of those that have everything at this point. You know, back to that 400-foot yacht, the billionaire wants to go in and play all over the city, then donate that yacht and buy yourself a new one, and people will welcome you back. You can be a hero. And I mean, it may sound like a fantasy, but it would actually be good for that billionaire to do that, you know, in all aspects of his or her life. And so that's I think is what is going to transpire as the message gets out there, whether I'm part of it or not. If I disappeared today, it may even be a more interesting story, you know, that people will say, hey, what happened to that 222 guy? You know, maybe there's something to that. Then I can come back after it got popularized. But until then, I'm the spokesperson and the DJ. Did we talk about Clubhouse yet?
No, we will in a little bit, but you said a number of remarks that I think we should build upon here. First of all, don't go anywhere anytime soon. I think the world still needs you as a spokesperson. Maybe in a few years, once the project is at a more mature stage and you want to take a break for whatever reason, that might be a better time. But I do feel like the world needs all of us to be at our most active, especially as we come out of this pandemic. We have an opportunity to build a much better society than the one that preceded the pandemic. But you also mentioned your alternative conflict resolution skills, and I'm curious if these were contributors to your ability to remain so calm and level-headed and essentially above the fray during the 2019 U.S. Transhumanist Party Presidential Primary election. And for those who didn't follow it as closely as some of us had, unfortunately, there were some candidates who behaved in an uncivil manner, who engaged in personal attacks, who essentially tried to play conventional politics, even though they were clearly instructed that transhumanist politics is not about that. But Charles was always above board in his conduct when he spoke at the debates, when he interacted with our members. He was always focusing on the ideas. He was always focusing on the positive proposals of his candidate platform and how to improve life for human beings, essentially along the same vein that he has been speaking to us today. And Charles did well in our primary. He placed third overall, ultimately, after the instant runoffs were concluded. He made it to the final round, so he wasn't one of the candidates who was eliminated in the prior rounds. And I think the people who also wanted the primary to remain issue focused, to remain above the fray, gravitated to Charles as a candidate. So Charles, I'm curious to hear you speak about what enabled you to remain so dignified and focused on the issues, and to be able to essentially just not have the fray affect you at all, because that's what it seemed like from the outside when I was observing your behavior. You could just navigate that situation so smoothly.
Well, thank you, Gennady. I've had a lifetime when I started, when prejudice and xenophobia and all of that was present. I realized it at an early age that people made decisions based on bullshit most of the time. You know, that they're emotional in their response, and that they attach to a small issue and make it into a big issue. And you know, I don't know if that's considered just in normal everyday. I run into small talk, you know, that somebody will explain and then explain and explain and explain and explain something that makes absolutely no difference to me. You know, it's a behavioral thing. So I may be a sociopath of sorts as well, you know, that, but my empathy, you know, it's not that I don't feel for the individual, and I do. I can relate to most anybody at any level, you know, and I've proven it to those that are in the street and don't have anything. And I've also been in a boardroom or two, but I've got more time just as an observer and not someone in a position. And the observations I've made is that everybody can be reached if they take a little pause and something takes them out of their current turmoil or whatever it happens to be. And I found the turmoil between can't remember her name right now, but her and him that were the top two. I had a hard time listening to it. Right, I felt like I was listening to my two teenagers talk about things, and so I didn't have the skill to articulate my message and separate myself from them. I mean, I did to a point, but I wasn't committed to win, and I wasn't willing to embarrass them, you know, in the conversation. That wasn't what it was about. I figured my message, if I could, you know, get it in there, it would get some support. Not necessarily, I didn't ever think I was going to be president, but if I got the nomination, then some of the transhumanists that may not be in the Transhumanist Party might say, hey, this guy's got something, I want to listen. And then out of that, you know, somebody has asked me the other day if I was going to run for president again, you know, you know, I said, well, I don't have any plans, but we'll see if nobody else steps up. You know, I honestly would probably have to attach to a more established party, but I'd bring the transhumanist philosophy with me wherever I go, because through the nomination and the application process, it helped expand a very focused group of people that are generally educated, intelligent, and compassionate. But that's not what we were really running in. That's not what I was running against. I was running against adolescent personalities to a large degree, and so I didn't want to get into that fray. I saw no outcome for it. You know, when I was in business, I was always considered a bit unconventional, and the president of the company used to use conventional means to get under my skin, because I am fairly unflappable. I have been most of my life. You know, a few rare occasions of outburst, but the vice president said, "Charles, you can't push Charles. He pushes like a wet rope." You know, and so as I get a little older and a little more clever, I like that expression, that I can't be pushed in a wet rope. But as they push the wet rope, I tend to make a lariat and slip it around their ankle so I can yank them when I need to. And that's what those naysayers that may say, you know, 222 is not worth considering, or anything else, or this guy. You know, I'm not a kid anymore, but I feel like a lot of times when you come in with an idea to a group that's all focused and they're charged up emotionally about some particular topic, it's often impossible to tell them that the barn's on fire, right? They don't hear that, you know, they're stuck on their issues. So yeah, it was, the topics were too far off for me to bring them back around to something. But it was a learning experience for me, and yeah, staying above the fray or below the fray or wherever it happens to be, that the calm is where I tend to gravitate towards. But at this point, the opportunity for me to run for the candidacy of the Transhumanist Party brought me that much further out of my shell, that from the year of recovery in 2014. So 2019 wasn't that long after that, considering the pace of my recovery. It was a little early. If the election was this we were on now, I think I could do better than third place. You know, I don't think anybody said no to Charles, but that was one of the options. So, you know, I think everybody would accept it. But I think the more clear the message is, and the more successes we have in these other countries, as well as in the US, then that attention, and whether or not I would run again, but I may be able to influence a few votes if Suki 222 in 3 years is what it has the potential to be.
Yes, and indeed, I think everybody in the transhumanist community had a favorable outlook toward you as a result of your communications during the primary election. Nobody, to my knowledge, disliked you or voted against you, because we did have the ranked preference voting, and people could very clearly indicate their order of preference among the candidates. Of course, some people ranked you as first, others ranked you close to the top, so that when other candidates were eliminated, you received their reallocated votes. Almost nobody, to my recollection, put you near the bottom. So that's an indication that people were favorably inclined toward your message, as well as how you conducted yourself. And the two individuals you're referring to, I think it is good to just continue to speak of them as her and him. They attempted to turn the entire event away from a policy-oriented discussion and toward essentially personal attacks or sensationalism or agitation. And by steering clear of that, you and several other candidates as well were able to still make the experience as a whole beneficial for our members. And other individuals who did that were John Carrots, yes, Matt Taylor, Kristan Harris, and even our friend Vrillon, who couldn't participate as much as we perhaps would have wanted him to, but he, I think, tried a very unconventional method of campaigning, but nonetheless focused on the positives of transhumanism. And of course, we also had Kimberly Forsyth. She had to drop out for personal reasons close to the end of that campaign season, but she also brought a very positive, uplifting, techno-optimistic message, and she continued to collaborate with us afterward as well. So I think from that experience, we figured out who the true transhumanists were, who were the people who are in this movement because they care about the betterment of humanity, not because of any personal ambition or because of using the party as a vehicle for something else, but because they wanted to be part of this coalition that seeks creative ways to improve the human condition. And you mentioned the aspect of building a network of people, thinkers, activists who are going to be collaborating on these endeavors for years to come, I hope. And indeed, that was the not so hidden ulterior motive of that entire exercise. I think anybody with discernment who was involved in it realized at the time we weren't going to be able to elect the next president of the United States, but by going through the process, we would ideally coalesce this community around emerging technologies, around improving quality of life for people and achieving the kinds of outcomes that have eluded humankind throughout its history, but I think are possible now. So with 222, if it were achieved, it would be unprecedented as well, because dire poverty has been in existence for as long as humankind has been in existence. The absolute numbers of extremely poor people have been in decline over the past 40 years, with some exceptions. The pandemic period certainly has reversed some of those gains. But I do think there is hope in reaching a world where nobody faces starvation, nobody faces a lack of shelter, nobody faces contaminated water. Surely in an age of sustainable superabundance, as some transhumanists such as Peter Diamandis like to put it, there would not be any people who are deprived of these basic necessities. So I want to extend my appreciation to you for the work that you've been doing in this respect. And I think your involvement in the 2019 primary helped bring some of these initiatives into sharper focus for our members, and hopefully has helped you also attract some interest toward them, and will continue as a community to place a spotlight on them. Now, I know we're a bit past the 2-hour mark, so what I am going to do is, first of all, let you talk a bit about Clubhouse, and then after that, we will go around the panel and ask our panelists to make any concluding remarks or ask any final questions of you. And then, as is our custom, we will let our guest have the last word. But first, let's discuss Clubhouse. Now, for those who don't know, Clubhouse is a recently established platform. It has gained a lot of popularity during the pandemic. I am not on it, but the U.S. Transhumanist Party is on it, and our Director of Scholarship, Dan Elton, as well as one of our active members, Daniel Twett, are coordinating the USTP presence on Clubhouse. It's an audio-only platform that currently seems to be predominantly designed for Apple devices, though apparently, Charles, you've told me there is a trial for Android phones as well. So what do you know about that, and what has your experience on Clubhouse been?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Gennady. February 21st, my son said, hey, here's an app that will be good for 222. So I ignored it for a few days because I forgot about it. And then all of a sudden I hear from my phone these people talking, right? So I had put the button on accidentally, and I was in a room, as they call them, on Clubhouse. So as you say, it's audio format. I could now push a button and start a room in either of the two clubs that I had started end of February. The Suki 222 Club, which in that 9 or 10 weeks, I now have about 750, 800 members in the Suki 222 Club. And in the Human Rights Club, which is a more general, there are over 1,100 members in the Human Rights Club that I started. Now, during that time, I got on and I would go into a room if they were talking about the Sustainable Development Goals or impact investing or any of the things that I see that are interested in human rights, finance, and whatnot, what it's going to take to put this together. You know, you can put your interest, and then it gives you a menu of different rooms that are open at that time. And then you can go in and you can stay in the audience and just listen, or you can raise your hand, and then one of the moderators that started the room will bring you up to stage. And then there's normally an order of progression of who gets to speak. And when you get there, you can say, or what I say, my name's Charles 222, and then I'd go into my 2 gallons of water. And then I would make some comment to the conversation that was going on, because it's not 222 when I get there. Nobody'd heard of it. But the first 2 days, I had 100 connections. And I said, this is much better because these people have actually heard me speak and heard me answer a question or two, possibly from some of the other speakers. Sometimes the room is only 3 or 4 people. Sometimes it's a couple thousand people. You know, I haven't been in the 1,000 people rooms, but I spend a lot of time in the 10 to 50 person room. And I built my following up to 1,500 people that have listened to me talk about 222 in no uncertain terms. And then they have, it links to your Instagram. So as I'm talking, you would go up, click on my profile, read my profile, which very clearly articulates what 222 is about. And then you can go to my Instagram and see pictures. So while you're, and that goes for anybody else on stage. And normally you take a 1, 2, 3 minutes to introduce yourself, and unless it's your room. And I'm the moderator in the Suki 222 Club. We meet every Tuesday at 2:20. So it's yeah, but it is in beta testing in invitation only on iPhone, and it's not even invitation yet on Android. It's just certain people that the founders have picked. But if you have an iPhone and you wanted to try Clubhouse, you just email me or get me the information that for your telephone number, and I'll send an invitation out through the Suki 222 Club. So right now I think there's under 20 million users of the app, and as it gets released, they're projected to be, you know, hundreds of millions or billions of users like there are on many other apps. So then if you take that to scale and say, well, I've reached 1,500 people in 10 weeks, in 10 months, if there's a billion people on the app or a few hundred million, then I'll get a certain percentage of that. Out of those are people that are connected from all over the world, the people that you're talking to. And you can pick the level, and you can hear the sincerity in their voice. And then you can hear them answer questions. If they're less than credible, you can pick that out pretty quick, because you've got all these other people asking them questions, and you can see how they hold up under fire. if it comes that way. Or you can see, wow, the two people connected on there, and they're going to help each other move something forward that the whole room is talking about. And that, for instance, in the Mumsy Tutu that I mentioned from Cameroon, that's where we met. That's where she had a fundraiser that raised over $13,000 for her program in $5, $20, $50, $100 at a time. So, and there's actually a send money. If you go to some people's profile, I happened to get one early on, is a send money button that you can send money directly through the app. I think it's through Stripe is the format that they use. So it can be used, it can be monetized. I thought of people bringing people up on stage, and we have a funder that night you only come up on stage if you donated to the format and to do a fundraiser. So it's just coming out. It's going to grow, and I'm not saying it's going to be the biggest app because there's other audio apps coming out. Facebook's coming up with one, but Facebook, there's rumors that they're going to buy Clubhouse. So, but as far as growing 222, it has been, my Instagram account has gone up, has tripled, more than tripled by now. And the Twitter, I don't really use it, but my other social media platforms have particularly Instagram, has really grown from it. So I would suggest anybody that's interested, even if they have an Android, to stay in touch with me if they decide they want to get on there, and I'll send them an invitation, an iPhone right away, and the Android when it becomes available.
Yes, thank you, Charles, for that overview. And Dan Elton tells us that Clubhouse was released on Android just today. So
Yeah,
perhaps there will be broader access now that this has happened. He also says, if anyone needs an invite, please message him on Twitter or on Facebook. So get in contact with Dan Elton, our Director of Scholarship, if you are interested in getting onto Clubhouse. And he has also posted a link to the U.S. Transhumanist Party presence on Clubhouse. I've posted it again. We have 38 followers. Let's grow that number, and we shall see how we can use that platform going forward. Ideally, I would like to use it in a way that would generate recordings to be shared on other platforms such as YouTube, for instance. The advantage of this format is that we have both video and audio elements. So the virtual Enlightenment salons definitely have more functionality, but I am not averse to doing something in addition to the virtual Enlightenment salons on Clubhouse and seeing if we can draw a greater audience that way. So thank you, Charles.
Yeah, no doubt you will. It takes time to build the tribe, but you'll find people that are in line. And as Dan says, they just gave me another 1,000 invites. They were stingy with them for a while, but I've got the advice, and I'm sure Dan will get more. The more active you are on it, the more invites you get. And it's good to know that Android, I knew there were some users out, but now if I can invite people and Dan can invite people on Android, that's a big step forward. And it's still just in testing on Android. It's still in beta on Android. But.
Yes. And Alexandria said that she has heard some podcasts that were recorded via Clubhouse. So it seems to be at least feasible for some people to do. Definitely.
That's right.
A functionality to look into. All right. So I think we have come to the point in our discussion where I will ask for each of the panelists to provide any closing remarks, comments, or questions. Let's start with Art Ramon Garcia.
Yes, and some of these African communities, have you looked into maybe creating like a community aquaponics system where rather than taking directly from the surface water, you could sort of draw from it, then filter it through some sort of sand gravel filter, and then further filter it through a growing bed where people can grow vegetables. And then from that, it would filter into a fish tank. Uh, and then you could probably then just take the water from the fish tank and then further filter that through your filters. And it's already gone through several stages of filtering. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, it reminds me of technology somebody was telling me of last week. It's a system of a container, a shipping container that has a solar array, has aquaponics in it, and has fish in it, in this container. So my question is how much does it cost for the production that you get out of it? And can it be taken to scale? So if there was a community, I see that as a large, not an individual system, but a ecosystem for a properly planned urban community, to where it does have the filtration using the natural soil. It does have the plant growth to provide food for the fish, and hopefully some agricultural crop that we could eat as well. So those systems thinking is exactly what we need. But we need to look at it and say, that little system is great for one or two people, but with the cost of it, the material, and its ability to be self-sufficient, it needs other systems around it as a backup. And how are those backups mirror what can be done on that micro scale? So I think of everything, it's great that it can go to micro and the individual, but we really need to think of it is what are we going to get out of it? How fast are we going to get out of it for the greater good?
Okay. And another comment, as far as sustainable materials, termites. Termites are a problem. I recently discovered termites in my house, and they're eating sheetrock. So I'm sure they would love hemp or bamboo or some of the fungus materials. So that's one thing to consider with some of these alternate building materials, is that pests like termites would just ravage it. So
right.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now let us go to Jason Geringer.
Hey, first of all, I think your history is like awesome. You got the courage to, throw your wallet out. I mean, how many people have the courage to do that and just have faith that they're going to make it? Reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Into the Wild, where the guy burns his money and goes out into the wild. Eddie Vedder did the soundtrack, but that's awesome. And I love your 222 idea. It's catchy. And I love UBI, the idea of UBI, but I think I like the idea of 222 more because, it's not just giving somebody money. I could see where a lot of people might be like, oh, I don't want to, I don't think we should just give free money away. But, giving somebody water and food is different, I think, and I actually think we do have an economic policy discussion kind of going on Discord, and I'm going to bring it up that maybe we could try to integrate our 222 into some of our UBI policy as like a transition into the UBI. It's possible. The other thing, while it's on my mind, I know we have our tiny house idea where I think one of the rules is that they can't have drugs and alcohol. I think we might need to maybe rediscuss that.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure the best answer for it, but I think that might like shoot it in the foot. Some people just won't go. They just won't do it, and so it'll, but that's for a whole other thing. I was wondering though, if you've ever looked into atmospheric water collectors. if
You know,
those are cost effective for how much water they gather or not.
right. I have been it's been brought up to me, and they're pulling the water out of the air, and even in the desert. But my question is what's the flow rate per dollar? What's the flow rate per, how many people will serve? And I have the suspicion that desalination is going to be a much better process, though it's expensive and uses energy, quite a bit of it. From what I know, is that technology is much more proven than the atmospheric water. But I don't know. I'm open for somebody to convince me otherwise, and maybe if I did more due diligence, I would already be convinced. But I know it's not being done now. And if it was, then Coca-Cola would be using it, So
I think I would have to agree, actually, that desalinization is probably going to be a better idea at the beginning. I just can't. I mean, I know you can get water out of the atmosphere. There's humidity in the air, but I just can't see getting a lot, I mean, whereas the ocean is full of water, you could desalinize it, so. All right. Hey, awesome to meet you. Thanks for coming. And,
yeah, thank you, sir. I'll keep it up.
Yes, indeed.
Back to you, Gennady.
So thank you, Jason and Charles. And I will note that there is a discussion that transpired in the spring of last year on the Archer report with Steele Archer between myself and Alexandria Black on the subject.
Yes. I've seen that. Yeah.
Of good. The U.S. And there's Alexandria. So we discussed the U.S. Transhumanist Party's proposal to essentially provide free housing for the homeless using emerging construction techniques, and to give the homeless individuals title to that housing, but under the condition that drugs and alcohol be kept out of that community. And I will point out, this wouldn't extend to policing these people's lives wherever they went. It's just if they tried to bring those substances in, somebody would kindly tell them that they're not permitted, so they would have the choice of relinquishing the substances or going somewhere else. But the idea is, if the reason for their homelessness is some sort of substance abuse problem, then having a space that is free of that would help them to overcome it. But I understand it may be difficult for some people. I just would like every homeless individual to be set on a path toward improvement, where improvement is possible out of their own motivations, driven by their desire for a better life. And I think most people have a desire for a better life. It's just that sometimes if they do engage in certain suboptimal behaviors, if their minds are altered through the consumption of drugs and alcohol, that prevents that desire from manifesting and can entrench some of the tendencies that could have led them to be homeless in the first place. On the other hand, those who are homeless for reasons unrelated to drugs or alcohol, like people who became involuntarily unemployed because of the pandemic, or who have otherwise fallen on hard times, or even people who might have ventured out into that world in a similar manner to what Charles did, but perhaps they weren't able to make it out afterward. Right. They would be greatly helped by that kind of initiative.
Yeah, I agree that it would be better to keep, the drugs out of there, and that's the way ideally it should be. It's just I don't think some of them, like that one, they had a group of these tiny houses made in California, and they had to make pets be allowed because otherwise people just wouldn't do it. You know, if it's I know it's weird that it's a choice between their dog or the a house. It's a dog. But.
It's amazing how many people living in the street have pets. A lot of people who live in the street have dogs. Yeah.
For protection.
And there's a lot of mental illness. Oh, hello.
Hi. Yeah, they often have that dog for protection because they're on the street. And I'm pretty much in agreement with Jason here. I relented a year ago with Gennady just because I thought we had to go ahead and make a resolution. But I think it requires a more nuanced answer. It's a very complex problem. And fundamentally, every Band-Aid bit of coping that happens is because of a more systemic problem. And if we bring people back to health, if we bring them back to feeling they have any kind of sovereign agency, I think they'll do better. I think these things will be less attractive, but I don't think it's right to outright forbid them, like, you be good or you're going to lose your house, or you just can't take that in with you. I think we really need a more nuanced answer on that. And while I'm here, well, no, we'll answer that first before I continue further.
All right, Charles, what are your thoughts on how feasible it would be to create communities where homeless individuals are able to live, but they're not able to bring any harmful addictive substances?
Well, I think there has to be a zone like that, but there's also has to be a zone for those people that would rather stay with the bottle or stay with the drugs than get sober, and what those underlying conditions are. So we can't just exclude people that won't give it up, because there are people that are living in the park intentionally so that they can have that very freedom and nobody tells them. But in many cases, if you reach that person and got at the root of why they were in the street or why they were doing the drugs, then if you want to call it rehabilitation or repurposing of their own lives is possible. So yeah, but absolutely, if you go in an area that drugs and alcohol are not tolerated, then you should be removed from the area. But placed in an area more appropriate for your rehab. One of my best friend's son, he's been sober now, I think today, for a year, and great potential, but I couldn't tell him anything during the time that he was abusing, and he would go somewhere else to where he was and continue to run his life down, both financially and that of his family. So yeah, it's very sensitive, but you have to be consistent in when you set up a zone. You have to be consistent with that zone.
I do think it would be really valuable to have a zone like that, like Gennady is saying, so that way, because there is that safe zone, like you're saying. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
And indeed,
we can have segregated areas. How's that sound? If you can deal with it, that condition, live there. If you can't, you're still not out of a house.
But it could be a different community.
Yeah.
Well, and then you get into abusive behavior against women, right? A bigger problem than the alcohol and the drugs, really. That causes more pain, suffering, and children's. So, what do you do there? How do you? There's a move of abolish the police, right? Well, that's not the answer. We just need to be able to deal with individual personalities on a very real level, and then get those people, if they want the help they need, but also tell them very, very matter-of-factly that the behavior that is not accepted will not be tolerated. And I went to early on. I was talking about the injustice of the distribution of wealth. Maybe I didn't use the term, but just by zip code, right? So people are used to being able to abuse others, and really even taking it out of their conscious, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. But the behavior that we all need to exhibit needs to be clear, that in order to transform society into a 21st century healthy being, then we need to take certain action in order to live with ourselves as well as with each other. And if those are centered, again, around this is what behavior is required for you to come to sit at this table and eat, this is what, and if you can't sit at this table and eat, your food's outside and you have to eat it by yourself, or whatever is clear. So people know that what's tolerated and what's not in relationship to sustainable food, water, shelter. And after that, I think if we get that, they'll have a lot less mental illness. We'll have a lot less secondary healthcare costs and primary healthcare costs for that matter. So yeah, it has to be addressed, and those, but it has to be consistent, and it has to be fair and just.
Yes, indeed, these are important considerations, and I'm glad that you've outlined them, Charles. And homelessness, unfortunately, is a complex issue. I do think significant strides can be made toward combating it, and a lot of thought should also be given as to the underlying conditions that precipitate it, so that people are not once again thrust into these kinds of situations after receiving any kind of relief. One would hope that the relief would set them onto a path of sustainable improvement, where with a little bit of help, they can also start to help themselves and also help lift others out of dire poverty. Now, Alexandria, you had some other comments as well.
Oh, I hope I'm not stirring too much. If I ask you, Gennady, would weed be allowed in the better communities?
Well, right now, the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform, we support the legalization of marijuana, but in those communities, there would be a prohibition on the presence of alcohol and recreational drugs. And the reason is essentially the people who are in that position of homelessness, they are not in the same place in terms of their lives as the general population. So with the general population, yes, alcohol is legal, nicotine is legal, marijuana is legal in many places, and I think people should have the right to determine to what extent, if at all, they engage in those kinds of habits. But that's because they have other structures in their lives and other habits and other margins of safety that would prevent single use of those substances from completely destroying their lives, and also from inflicting harm upon others. Also, people in the general population, they're not recipients of that kind of aid. So they're not getting free housing. They're not getting other kinds of assistance, like assistance with food, assistance with job training, perhaps, that these homeless individuals would receive. So I would consider that kind of abstinence to be part of their implicit payment for the service of being lifted out of that condition, being helped to a different kind of life, a better kind of life. Now, in the future, if they're able to earn themselves another place to live, if they're able to get other employment, or if they're just outside of the boundaries of that community and they choose for whatever reason to indulge in those habits, Legally, I don't think there's anything that could stop them from doing that. One would hope that perhaps if they have a period of so-called detox within these communities, they would be a bit more careful, a bit more judicious about using those substances in the future. Hopefully, some of them will choose to abstain from them altogether. So the idea is, because they are in this special condition of homelessness, which requires external support, whereas people in the general population do not require that kind of support, there could be some restrictions or conditions that are attached to all the good things that they would be given. But again, it's not a permanent restriction. One would hope that those who are homeless don't stay homeless for long, and they can use this support as a stepping stone to the next stage of their lives.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have that, because just like what I was saying about somebody just won't go to the place if they got to give up the drugs, if there was drugs, available or allowed all the time, they would never quit either. You know what I mean? If you just let them, they just won't stop. So, because they can't, you know what I mean? So it is a really, good idea. So that's it. Back to you.
Yeah, we would have to strengthen those social programs we'd have to strengthen the social programs that we put in place with health care for those people, when that are addicted and realize those problems. So, I don't think it's full just it's been tried, and the campgrounds, the national campgrounds, there's no alcohol involved or allowed, but there's certainly alcohol consumed, and as long as it's consumed responsibly and the person doesn't cause a harm to society, to others, or to themselves, or to property, it's going to be difficult to exclude those people in a geographic type boundary, but because we're all subject to it, right? So there, to some addiction, given some stimulus, we would become dependent, perhaps ourselves. So we can't. Yeah, exclusion's not the answer. It's actually inclusion through education and social programs that we have to give that person, even if they have food, water, and shelter. They may be some of the wealthiest people on the planet, but they still have those particular habits that are causing harm or potential abuse to other people. So just to go back to whether it's in the U.S. or another country, if there's a woman and children that's abused in a penthouse in Manhattan, they don't have dignified access to 222, even though that they may have the best of every material thing in the world. They have no dignified life. So it's a matter of whatever society, whatever geographic boundaries, whatever housing materials we use, it gets down to the care of the individual and their feeling of inclusion in the group. And if we can do that, we'll solve a lot of the drug and alcohol abuse if we can reach the individual at a deeper level.
Yes. Thank you, Charles, for those remarks. And Alexandria, anything to conclude?
I just wanted to say that we have much respected you in the 2 years that we've known you. And I wish I'd ranked you up even a few higher than I had in voting. I'm pretty sure you ranked pretty high. And, 2 years ago, live and learn. But I much appreciate your continued collaboration with us. Oh, just one side note about Clubhouse. I dropped it in officer chat, an article about how we really don't have any expectation of privacy over there, and we're just going to have to deal with it. There's zero privacy policy.
Right. Yeah, that's what I like about it. That's what I like about it.
Oh, well, I don't know. I got finished over there in an NFT group a while back, and I was getting too busy with mom and all that anyway. I will turn my iPhone back on someday and at least hit our USTP group. But yeah.
And the
But
Suki group.
I got through. Click, check the chat and click through to find that article I pasted in our Zoom chat.
I have shared it in the YouTube chat as well.
Good. I think that's about all I have to say, except thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alexandria.
Yeah.
And it seems that we're having a bit of a connection issue with Charles, but I hope that he's able to reconnect very shortly. What I will say is that...
Am I there?
Yes, you are there. So, Charles, I think while your connection still has some semblance of transmission, why don't you provide your closing remarks to the extent that you can?
Sure. Okay. Well, the name of the group is Suki 222. The website is suki222.org. And on that, you over the coming weeks, you'll see the board of directors fill out with women looking towards a majority women board. And if you are aware of a population that has the ability and the desire and the leadership within the community that has a lack of either food, water, shelter, then I would want them aware of 222. So the idea, my expectation is sometime in the coming months that 222 hits that point of a meme that people around the world in different languages will see and have an opportunity to see what we've done, what we're doing, what we propose. And as I say, right now we're in the sights of some major funders, that wants to do good in the world. So, and I expect as we build our team and build these small successes, that you can always help with. Those filters cost $22, and there's a donate button on the website and a donate button on Clubhouse. So, and they both go directly to that account. So, and we're not just dealing with the water, but this is a way that we can really make a splash on social media. No pun intended, but we'll be known, and then the world will have to make a choice. You know, they'll ask, is there a way? You know, what about this technology? What about this? What about that? I've heard about this. I've heard about that, and then we'll have open discussions and experts within those fields as guests within our Clubhouse group and within our other social media platforms. So, and then as time goes by, I'll get an interview from we've already been interviewed in Colombia, but the next one's in Tanzania. The next one may be in Tampa because of work we're doing with University of South Florida, or at least we plan to do. We're not doing any work yet, but the professors there say, yes, let me know. I'll help advise. So the team is going to build, and it's going to go to many, many millions of people will eventually, within, I don't know how long, but we'll hear of 222. And among them, some of the more powerful people in the world. And then we're going to have to make a choice. You know, there are ways to do it. Do we have the will to do it? And that's what we're going to have to ask ourselves. You know, do we have the will to make sure everyone has adequate food, water, shelter in this and future generations? And are we willing to recognize the threats as they exist and the need for cooperation?
Thank you very much, Charles, for those remarks and for joining us for nearly 3 hours today. We always consider it a pleasure to hear about the progress of your projects, and I do hope that more and more people throughout the world will be able to have access to 222 as a result. Alexandria, any thoughts?
Oh, I tried to bring it up in Zoom chat. This project we heard of a few years ago, it's in development. Some woman architect has created a tent about yurt sized, and what it does, it'll collect atmospheric water and solar power. It's very vented and has good ventilation. I don't remember what to call it. Maybe someone else remembers, but that's another way to get water. This atmospheric collector on a tent. That's about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think we've discussed a variety of creative ideas today. Some of them are worthy of further research and exploration. If anyone watching this finds more sources for any of the ideas that have been discussed, please feel free to share. Once the YouTube video is finalized, you will be able to post in the regular YouTube comments below the video. So any additional information that anyone has in that regard, please provide in the comments. And for now, thank you to all of our audience members who have been with us for now a year of virtual Enlightenment Salons. We will hope to continue them on a weekly basis every Sunday, typically at 1 p.m. U.S. Pacific time. We will bring you these in-depth, cross-disciplinary conversations for the purpose of uplifting the human condition and bringing this new transhuman era into fruition. Until then, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Thank you, Gennady.